Yeah, or something that you might have to read that one. If I you know how to refer to it, I've noticed it's like sometimes like people send me stuff and I never heard of this thing.
All right, good morning. Welcome back to 2021, maybe. I don't know. I was telling my kids, it was like the email that the nurse sent to me was so bizarre. It was like, make sure to wear protection to class. I was like, oh, that's really open. I was like, I'm gonna wear my inflatable dinosaur costume because it's my own bubble, right? Like that would have been funny trying to teach like dino arms. I was thinking about it just to be snarky. But, how many of you? It looks like most of you. Notification, my announcement that are sent out. Did not. Okay, so if you're not getting them, make sure you go on Canvas. You can set your notifications. So if I ever send you a message like, make sure you wear a mask or there was an exposure, or if I had tested like positive for some reason and had to cancel class and do it virtually, you're getting that. So just make sure that you're getting my notifications, right? And you really only need to wear a mask probably today because Monday we have no school. And so by the time I see you next, it's Wednesday. And at that point, we're kind of in the clear. It's totally up to you. You can obviously wear a mask anytime that you want to. That's completely your choice. I'm wearing one today to set the example. I debated all night. I was like, I don't want to. It's so hard to like talk loud and breathe. So forgive me for that. I feel like I'm like trying to catch my breath. But I probably will wear one today and then not on Wednesday. But it's completely up to you. We did have 1 or 2 people in here test positive for COVID. They're obviously not here. And I guess that's probably just gonna happen, right? It's so funny. My partner teaches high school English at Royal. She has 14 people out today with COVID. And they didn't do a thing about it. They were like, it's fine, just come to class, be fine, just send those students home. Like meanwhile, we're like all wearing masks. So it's so subjective. So just do whatever makes you comfortable. And that's completely fine.
And then we have a book, I heard that like the tech at these schools is better than the tech we have here in some cases.
Oh, of course.
So it's like a full office.
It is. Every spot's so different, right? Was there another hand? You pick up a question about that? Again, just make sure your notifications are set so you do get those. I would hate for you to come if class was canceled for some reason or whatnot. Or if I remind you of like a homework assignment or something like that. Okay. All right. So I did give you a homework assignment. I hope you had some time to look at the case study and that you found it interesting. What I want you to do, so this was about Mark. Forgot his name, I had to check. Mark. I want you to take a few minutes, just with a few people around you, whatever's convenient. I want you to share what you came up with for Mark. And if somebody has something you didn't write down, you're more than welcome to add it. But we'll talk about it together in a few minutes, but take a few minutes just with whoever's around you. Kind of go over it really quickly, what you come up with, and then we'll talk about it as a big group. So find a few people and go ahead and talk about it.
Wait, so you get the mic. We're 20 people. Pretty sure.
A textbook that's similar. Okay. So it's instead of fundamentals, it's just about same. But I still use it.
So obviously you're gonna have like a chapter mainly and like what it's not gonna match.
I'm noticing, yeah, the content is the same. It's like every other chapter matches up with the chapter.
As long as you don't mind if not matching that, it's fine. You should be able to find it. Just might have to work a little bit. If that one, that's the one you have, it's fine. So just another minute. So just another minute. All right, let's. Okay. So this was a great way to practice. You'll never do anything this involved like on an exam or anything like that, but I think it's a good way to see how you can find evidence of each model that we talked about. And sometimes it's even hard to know where to put stuff, right? Like you could probably put it in multiple spots depending on which way you're viewing it. But let's go through Mark. Can't remember this guy's name. Mark, let's go through Mark's behavior. Anyone want to share what are some biological things? Give me one biological thing you have for Mark. Yeah.
He seems to like have a lack of adrenaline or whatever that area is, so he seeks adrenaline to like kind of all that environment in his body.
Yeah.
So like chemically there seems to be something off in him.
I love that, right? Kind of like that, that thrill-seeking behavior can sometimes indicate like a neurotransmitter deficiency of some kind, whether it's adrenaline, dopamine, or whatever it might be. Love it. That's fantastic. Yeah.
Said he's been in a lot of fights, he might have head trauma or something.
Oh, I like that, right? Okay, maybe he has some kind of trauma, right? We have to speculate, and I love that. Yeah. Yeah, predisposed, maybe genetic for him, right? Those are all big biological contributors, right? That might be explaining his behavior. What about from whoa, oh, that's very good.
That's so cool, dude. She was like, no.
Oh.
Not it.
Holy, I don't like swatted. You all reacted very well. I would not. Oh, had that been me and my back was turned and something landed on my head, I would have never. See, I read it. All right. That's it.
Maybe know what that. Because he grew up, he didn't have super ego, he didn't have a moral code that well. So his head controlled most of his life in his childhood.
Yeah.
And because his ego is weak, in the id is kind of dominant.
Mhm.
He's in conflict, internal conflict. And because of that, he's feeling a lot of stress.
Okay, I love that, right? Dominant id, not enough maybe of a super ego, and the way that that's affecting him. I love that. That's great. What else? Yeah.
His mom left at a young age, his father was in and out of jail, so that
Yeah.
left some long-term side effects on him.
For sure, right? So the fact that like mom leaving from a Freudian perspective would be massive, right? And then some of the things going on between the mom and dad, all of those early childhood things would shape. Yeah.
Expanding upon like his father leaving and stuff, at one point it mentions how he can't like stay with a woman.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if you made that connection or like you kind of like, oh, I can't get with a woman because I'm actually going to leave or whatever.
Yeah.
It also leads to like a logical maybe not, but in this aspect, that's kind of what I'm getting from it.
And that makes me super happy that you're like, I can also see where it fits in the cognitive one, right? Which it does, but you can put it here as well, that maybe he really struggles in his relationships with women because of what happened with his mom. Right, that's so Freud. Freud would be all of it, right? Like drooling with excitement at like everything that's happening. I can feel it. All right. Anything else from that perspective? Those are the big ones, but anything else? Freudian. How about behavioral? What are some behavioral things? Yeah.
It's almost like he was conditioned to do these things, expect fights or anything like that. Because when he does it, he gets the attention that he so very much requires or craves.
Yeah.
As well as he sees the alarm. When he hears the alarm, he pulls a adrenaline rush,
Yeah.
which he constantly is looking for, waiting for.
Yeah, I like that, right? Some classical conditioning with that alarm, right? Getting attention is a reward. It's gonna make you do it again or more. What else do we have from that one? Anything else we can add? I have a couple other things written down. Anything else behaviorally?
Like he possibly didn't have the best home life
Yeah.
and he just needed some, he needed some form of stimulation and that's why we got all our attention.
Yeah, acting out gives him attention. He's rewarded for acting out, right? And so he's gonna be more likely to do it again. Anything else that we want to add there? You don't have anything to say? I also wrote that he was like rewarded for the praise, like the praise he would get from elementary school talks. So kind of in a positive direction, modeling from his dad, right? Kind of watching what his dad did and modeling that behavior is another element of behavioral stuff. How about from a cognitive perspective? What are some like cognitive things that you wrote down? Yeah.
At one point, it says that he, like his thought process is people only let you down or leave.
Yeah.
That's obviously like not the most logical way of thinking, it's caused by his past experiences. And then same thing as earlier, like, and it's implied like that his mother leaving is also the reason why he also said that's also kind of this conflict.
Yeah.
Just two things.
And it's very black or white thinking. Either let you down or they leave. Like there's obviously a whole other range of outcomes in there. You're either first or you're last, right? Like it's like that same idea. Very illogical thinking. And that's something that I think is important here. Anyone have anything else from a cognitive perspective that we could add? I put that sentence in there to really like put something there for sure. Yeah.
Probably his. So that's probably why it seems like it's.
Yeah, I like that, right? I'm looking at his thinking processes in general, and he solves things and approaches them. Love it. Or you could also have talked maybe a little bit about his like self-esteem being low. that might shape his expectations of what he's capable of or not capable of. Just another thought. How about the humanistic existential model? Anyone have something there? Yeah.
I think Maslow might say that he's not reaching his fullest potential.
Yeah.
Actualization because his basic survival needs weren't quite met in childhood because of the constant instability and
Yeah.
dealing with poverty, violence, and all of those things could make him feel unsafe. And without fulfilling that first layer, he is taking that instability into his relationships, and then he doesn't feel as connected, and so it just kind of continues to build on that one lack of stability. in
Yeah.
childhood
Yeah.
aspect.
That's great, right? Looking at how, and we didn't talk specifically about like Maslow and his hierarchy of needs, but that fits there, right? Of like, he's not getting those basic needs met, so it makes it hard for him to realize his potential. Love it. Other thoughts? Yeah.
It just seems like he's made like his own meaning or like goal in life, it's his work, as like a fireman or like firefighter slash public speaker for the elementary school kids and stuff. Because that's like, it seems to be right now the only thing that gives him that
Yeah.
like good feeling and whatnot, so. It just seems to be his only right now.
Yeah, source of meaning for him, for sure. And remember that perspective is a lot about like, what gives you meaning? Yeah, hey.
I was like gonna say pretty much the same thing with his job, is like what keeps him motivated.
Yeah.
It was knowing that like people respect him for who he is.
Yeah, and you can even add that like he's kind of doing good with like his job, right? Like that. And remember that perspective about like goodness and growth, right? So he's taking some of those things that could have gone in a worse direction and doing good with them with like his career. How about from the cultural perspective? Anybody who hasn't maybe chimed in yet? Anyone else who hasn't had a thought? Is that a hand? You moved. I got excited. Yeah.
So I guess I just put sort of a lot of pressure from being like African American and having one parent around growing up, his mom leaving, kind of coming from a more poor neighborhood, things like that sort of explain why he's like more prone to do things like commit crimes.
Yeah, family dynamic, right? Poverty and the low socioeconomic status, controversial, but it's way too much. Okay, right, and I put that in there on purpose because sometimes it's a factor that we need to consider, right? And I would say more than his race, it's the socioeconomic status and some of those things that happen, but we still want to consider it as an element that like could be contributing. Anybody have anything else there? Yeah.
As part of it too, but I also specifically asked was racism as well.
Yeah.
So his brothers, they were both kind of merging together, so growing up. Grew up, not sure what.
Yeah, that family culture, that family dynamic, right? Anything where we're talking about like the presence of other people and bigger forces at play. And of course, like when we're thinking about him, right, it's probably all of these things together that's going to explain his behavior, right? If we put all of that together, then we can kind of sum up and explain Mark, right? But it's important to understand that each model is going to view it a little bit differently and then dictate treatment a little bit differently. But we often combine them, right? And that's something that you'll see all semester that, okay, maybe there are some biological elements and some cognitive elements. So let's use both when we treat this individual, right? So again, hopefully good practice for you. If you want to go ahead and pack those up, make sure your first and last name is on there somewhere so I can give you credit.
Yeah, I'll make sure it is.
Oh, thank you. That's it. Thank you so much. Do I have everyone? All right. Last chapter before we get to the disorders, right? One more thing to kind of set the stage, right? So we view the different models and how we can kind of view things through different lenses. We talked about how we view things in the past and so on. The last step has to do with assessment, right? So how can we gather information about a person to then get to a diagnosis so we know what they have and how to treat them? Okay, so that's the last piece. And then we get to chapter 4, which are anxiety disorders. So we're almost there if you're waiting for the disorders. But we'll look at some different ways of assessing someone. And then how do we get a diagnosis? And then how does that dictate what we do next? So assessment is a really broad term. Okay, an assessment is like a test or just a way of gathering information. So it's a process where we're trying to collect information to understand something, right? To understand a client or a subject, or it could be a test and an assessment in a class. Like you take exam number 1 in here, it's my way of assessing how well did you understand everything we've covered so far. So an assessment is just broad. It's just a way of collecting information so I can understand whatever it is that's relevant to what I'm studying. And in our case, we're looking at something called clinical assessment. So we're trying to determine what's going on with a person. Like if somebody comes into therapy, we're going to do an assessment to find out what are your symptoms? What brought you in? What's your history? Why are you behaving the way that you're behaving? How might we help you? How do the things that we've noticed about you maybe reflect a certain disorder or disorders that I can diagnose you with? So this is, again, is really broad, and there's a lot of different ways that we can do this. What we sometimes say that we like to do is do a battery of tests. So just keep in mind as we go through this that we don't tend to just do one. We do like a battery or a collection of these. So we might interview you and observe your behavior. And maybe we give you a personality inventory. Or maybe if I think something's going on biologically, I might do some kind of like biological physical test as well. So we oftentimes use like a combination of different methods to get us to a diagnosis, to collect as much information as possible. And some of you maybe have had some of these different assessment methods that we're going to talk about. Some of them are really common and some of them a little less. I have a little clip for you, maybe not the best forms of assessment to just introduce it though. It's from The Simpsons, doing a quick assessment of Homer here, a bit more about that. But what you see in there, right, they do an inventory. He asks him some questions, like do you hear voices and so on. That's one kind of assessment. He looks at ink blots. Rorschach ink blots is another commonly used type of assessment, right? So there's a couple of things going on in there just to decide what his mental state is, right? In this case, they say insane, though that's not technically correct. You get the idea. So we'll look at some of the different ways that we can do this. But one side note first. Okay, let's see, there we go. Any of the assessment methods that we're talking about have to be good and have to be worth using. Okay, so I want to talk just for a minute about these characteristics that you want every test to have in order for the information it gives you to be worth using or to be helpful in any way. Okay, and I guarantee that every single one of you in here either has taken a bad test or will take a bad test at some point. Think about all the tests you've taken in a class. How many of you have taken one that was bad? And by a show of hands. Right? Almost all of you. If you haven't, that's amazing. What made it bad? What are some of the things that maybe made that test not so great? Yeah.
Lack of preparation.
What was that?
No, sorry, small stuff.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Lack of preparation.
Okay, so lack of preparation. So that's more on you, but still that would make it bad, okay?
Yeah,
Yeah.
The fact that it wasn't a multiple choice test.
Okay, so the format of the test. Okay, yeah.
Big questions.
Okay, I like that, right? Like that could definitely make it bad. What else? Anything else that made a test bad? Yeah.
Bad time limits. Like
Okay.
they're too low for the test itself.
Okay. How many of you have gone to take a test and you're like, we didn't cover this, right, in class, right? Those are the worst. When you study and you're preparing, you go to read the exam and you're like, we never covered this, right? It has nothing to do with anything, right? How do we get at actually measuring how well you understand something if it has nothing to do with what you actually covered? Like that information is not going to be helpful. Could be that the test was poorly written, or maybe the instructor didn't write the questions, so it's just so like off of what it was like when you learned it in that class. Or what if I gave you all an exam, but some of you got 2 questions and some of you got 80 and some of you got 20 and there was no consistency to it? How would that be fair, right? You want tests to be good. You want them to be fair. You want them to have these 3 things. So you want them to be standardized, reliable, and valid. Okay, and if a test doesn't have these 3 things to it, at least a decent amount, the information that it gives you isn't going to help. Okay, so standardized means that everybody gets like a relatively like standardized or like something that we can make a direct comparison with. Okay, so I give all of you maybe a similar version of the test or equivalent versions of the test. So I can directly compare one result to another. I imagine a lot of you took the SATs or the PSATs, or in graduate school, it's the GREs, all these three-letter awful word tests, you know, things. They're standardized tests. So if somebody takes the SATs, a score of 1200 is the same as another score of 1200. I can make a direct comparison. If I don't give you similar or equivalent versions of a test, how do I compare your results, your grades to each other in a meaningful way? I probably can't. We also want a test to be reliable or consistent, right? So consistency means that it produces like stable and dependable scores, right? So I want it to be that it's relatively similar every time you take it. Or maybe I give you one half and then the other half, and I compare the two, and I should see some consistency. And validity means that it measures what it's been designed to measure. Okay, so if when we take our first exam in here in a few weeks, right, end of September, about a month, I didn't want to panic you by saying a few weeks. Next week, no, I'm just kidding. In about a month. What if I give you a math test instead? Some of you might be thrilled. I would be really unhappy. I'm not a math person. I'm tapping out of like 6th grade math right now. It's way too hard for me. My daughter keeps going like, help me with my math. And I'm like, I'm so sorry. I need help too. But if I give you a math test, how is that going to measure how well you understood what we've covered in here? It won't. It's not valid. It's not measuring what it's been designed to measure. So one more example, think of a scale. A scale is an assessment of your weight. I have one in my bathroom. I don't step on it. I know better than to step on it anytime you're a holiday, especially, right? And we're getting closer to Halloween, closer to almost September, almost, right? But a scale, you want it to be standardized. The scale at your house should be calibrated the same as the one at the gym and the doctor's office. If you step on that scale at different places and it gives you a different number, which one's right? How do you know which one's right? Okay, so it should be calibrated, should be reliable and consistent. If I step on a scale today and it says 200 pounds, and tomorrow says 205, and the next day 180, and then 280, and it's all over the place, that number's probably not all that like correct, right? I want it to have some degree of consistency. It can vary a little. Say I have a really good day of eating, like I ate a whole cake or like something delicious, and it goes up a couple of pounds, and then the next day down a couple of pounds. That's okay. But big changes probably indicate there's something wrong with the scale. Validity is that it's accurate. If I step on the scale and it says 200 and I don't weigh 200, I weigh 250 or 150 or whatever it might be, then it's not going to give me anything that's helpful. So again, you want these three things, or that assessment method's not going to be very helpful for you. Yeah. How do you mean? It makes it tricky, right? So what if all of you, when you go to take the test, get 75 minutes, but there are a few people like in my classes who have 2 hours instead because they've been given an accommodation. It's a slippery slope sometimes, right? So what you're trying to do is balance whatever's going on in that individual's life that dictates them needing a little more time to perform at the same level as everyone else. So maybe if they have a lot of anxiety, by giving them time, you mitigate the anxiety so they can perform the same way as everyone. So it's a balancing act. Sometimes they can need it. Right.
If the team can go in.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right. And so, you know, you hope that you can make it as equivalent as possible, but sometimes it does make it a little hard to get as the same results as maybe everyone else. But you're trying to let that person be able to perform at the same level as somebody who doesn't need the accommodation is the goal. So I want to give you a bad test so you can see what these things look like when it's bad. Okay, now this is a test that I have to tell you, I was so sad because I'm going to give you what's called the Oreo personality test. And I bought Oreos for all of you, but we're all wearing masks and now I feel weird about handing them out. Like, I don't know how you feel. So somebody give me like a one way or the other. I mean, I could pass them around. If you feel comfortable taking them, you can take one. And if you don't, you can leave them for me and that's fine. I won't be mad, but I always like try to remember when I bought the Oreos and then I got the COVID result and I'm like, oh, what do I do with the Oreos? I mean, I could eat them all, but that's just seems we're just sitting in my office working down Oreos, right? So what I'm gonna do, two things. I'm gonna give you one of these little tests. It's really a very detailed, involved procedure test here. You're gonna read these options and choose your favorite method or methods of eating Oreos. Okay, now you can choose up to 2 if you want to, or you can choose a couple, whatever applies to you. And if you don't like Oreos, there is an option for that on there as well. So I'll hand these out. It should only take you a very short time to do. You're welcome to keep this, you're not giving it back to me. So just circle or like underline the circle line.
50% of our grade.
This is some kind of exam under.
They're on. So
Here. Bring that.
write your own answer. I just like to live this.
I don't think we need to borrow. What time did it?
Yeah.
Well, I read.
Okay, and then I'm gonna pass around the Oreos, and if you don't feel comfortable taking one, that's totally fine, there's no action. And the time-
I know it's hard. Eight doesn't get the nothing. 9, you just like to live in the 15, you don't have to.
Yeah, totally.
For example, if you in coffee, you're like.
Well, there's.
Yeah.
Milk is the opposite there. Because I circled that, but then I like it. I don't know.
I mean.
I'll give you just another minute or so, and then we'll talk about it.
I know that, it's like,
Okay.
I like the part, just eat the inside and throw out the rest of
It
it.
felt really mean of me to have you think about Oreos and not think more. I try to be mindful in my trade. Give me just a little bit longer and then we'll overeat.
I can do that.
Is everyone done? You made your hard decision?
Just like the liquid, like
All
the outside or.
right, so this is a bad test of personality, and I want you to be thinking about why we're gonna talk about it. But let me give you the results first, because I mean, I have to. That would be mean of me to give you a test and not tell you what it means. I want to let you know that these are fairly insensitive, like a little bit, like mildly insensitive. So I think that makes them funny, but just, just keep that in mind. This isn't a real test. So don't take it too seriously. But let's go through them. I'll tell you what each one is. So number 1, the whole thing all at once. Is that anyone in here? All at once? Couple of people, okay. You consume life with abandon. You are fun to be with, exciting, carefree, and have a hint of recklessness. You're also totally irresponsible. And no one should ever trust you with your children.
Wow.
I know. All right, number 2, one bite at a time. How many of you? One bite at a time? A bunch of you, okay? You're lucky to be one of the 5.4 billion other people who like to eat Oreos this exact same way. Just like them, you lack imagination. But that's okay, you're totally normal. All right. Slow and methodical nibbles, examining the results of each bite afterwards. You were like confident. It was such a funny reaction. Okay. You tend to follow the rules. You're tidy and orderly, meticulous in every detail with everything you do, to the point of being anal retentive and irritating to others. Stay out of the fast lane if you're only going to go the speed limit. Feverous nibbles. I picture a squirrel. I don't know. Feverous nibbles. Yeah, was that again? You're like, if it is, I'm not even. Your boss likes you because you get your work done quickly. You have a million things to do and never enough time to do them. Mental breakdowns tend to run in your family. Okay. Number 5, dunked in some liquid. This is one of my methods. Okay, a few of you. Dunked. Okay, everyone likes you because you're always upbeat. You sugarcoat unpleasant experiences and rationalize your bad situations with a good one. You're in total denial about the shambles you pull along. Wow. Number 6, twist it apart, the inside and then the cookie. This is my other method. Quite a few, okay. You have a highly curious nature. You take pleasure in breaking things apart to find out how they work. And when you're not able to put them back together, you destroy all evidence of your activity. You deny your involvement when things go wrong. You're a compulsive liar and exhibit deviant, if not criminal behavior. All my deviant criminals out here. All right, next one. Twist it apart the inside and then you toss the cookie. Number 7. Couple people, okay. You are good at business and you take risks that pay off. You take what you want and you throw the rest away. You're also greedy, selfish, mean, and lack feeling for others. But that's okay. You got yours. Almost done. Just the cookie and not the inside. You enjoy pain. Yeah. All right. Number 9. I like to lick them and not eat them. Nobody ever admits to that one. I mean, you know. Trying to raise her hand a little bit. Stay away from small furry animals and seek professional medical help immediately. All right, last one. I don't have a favorite word because I don't like Oreos. You ready? Not an Oreo fan? You probably come from a rich family. You like to wear nice things and go to upscale restaurants. You're particular and fussy about the things you buy, own, and wear. Things have to be just right. You like to be pampered. You're a prima donna, and there's just no pleasing you. So again, this is a bad test and somewhat offensive, but funny. I want you just for a minute with a couple of people around you, whoever you talked with earlier. Why is this a bad test? Okay, so like in a way that feels obvious, but try and link it to this if you can. Just talk about it for like 2 minutes. Why is this a bad test of personality? And then we can talk about it together. So just whatever's convenient, talk about it for 1 minute, maybe 2 minutes.
If we pass the final.
What was that?
If we pass the final.
Well, you can keep it if you want. Then pass the final, yeah. 100%. I have to pass around. I mean, one, I can't even. All right, so why is this a bad test? Like, again, it's obviously not a great test, but why? What makes it not like a good test of personality? What are some of the things you came up with? Yeah.
There isn't any empirical data.
Yeah. Okay, I like that, right? No data, right? Like, what are we basing this off of, right? It just seems like somebody just kind of wrote it to be funny, right? What else? What else makes it bad? Why might it be a bad test? Yeah.
You let it be like muscle better want it to, so it's not like stable and dependable scores but things.
Yeah. How many of you chose more than one method by show of hands? Okay, so I had 2. It depends for me on how many Oreos I plan to eat, right? Like if I'm gonna eat like a whole row, then I'm not gonna waste some milk in there to like waste those calories. If I'm only gonna have a few, then I'll dunk them into milk, right? So it might change based on the day, based on how many you're gonna eat, based on your mood, right? Like, and that would affect a little bit of our consistency, right? What if you answer differently every time, right? Anybody else? What are some other things? Anything else on here that might make it not a great test? Yeah.
There's still other ways to eat Oreos.
Yes.
Here.
Okay.
Like, I answered I follow all the names several Oreos to evolve and eat it.
Okay, okay. Interesting, so there might be a method of eating Oreos that isn't on there. So I can share with you, my youngest, Paisley, she likes to eat Oreos in a way that she calls fish and dip. And it's kind of gross, but she loves it, and she does it every day, and so fish and dip, that's like her nickname at this point. She takes goldfish.
Oh.
Yeah, my kid, this is my strange, odd little bird, I love it all. She likes to open the Oreo, right, and then she takes goldfish and scoops out the like center and eats them that way, and then eats the cookie. It's like her favorite food in the world, yeah, they sound good. So you're welcome if you try that and you love it. You're welcome. But there are other ways to eat Oreos, maybe yours isn't on here. Right? I dare you to try it, I've had to try it. She's always like, can you try it, please? I'm like, I really don't want to. It's not awful, but it's a little weird. She has weirder ones, like she likes to dip cinnamon twists in ketchup. Like cheese for Taco Bell, like, I don't know. Teriyaki sauce on Mexican rice. What? Yeah. Why? Right there. No. That one's gross. Yeah. Oh. It's not awful, but it's definitely odd, right? But maybe your method isn't on here, right? Which would definitely be an issue. Anything else you came up with? Anything else at all that you can think of with why this might be not the best test? There's one like really obvious one, right? Does it really measure your personality?
Oh, maybe.
Like, maybe a little bit. You're like, yeah, that fits, right? Like a little, right? It's not the most like accurate. Like, I mean, we could give you another type of cookie test and see if they correlate, like to judge that as like a criteria. But it's so simplified that it probably doesn't really measure your personality, right? It's more just for fun. So again, if you have a test that doesn't have these three things, the information is kind of meaningless. So just something, we're going to talk about good tests for the most part, but you want it to have these three elements or it's not really worth using. Is that a hand, Jake?
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I could relate to multiple like things that were mentioned. Like, I chose number one, but I could relate to like things that were related to like number 6.
Okay.
Or, like,
Yeah.
and there are things I, on number one that I didn't relate to. So it's not really, it's like, who came up with this thing? Like,
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it was, it's created very randomly. You're welcome to give it to somebody else in your life. If you Google Oreo personality test, it'll come up right away. But definitely not a good test. And a lot of tests online will say that they're an intelligence test or a personality test. Is it really measuring that? Right? So always be kind of a little bit critical, right? Especially if it's free and online. It might not always be the best, even if it's entertaining. So some of the different types of assessments that we use. An interview is by far the most common. If you go to therapy for the first time, the entire first session is what's called a clinical interview. And it can be a little frustrating because sometimes it takes a lot for them to go to therapy, right? Like maybe you had to finally find a therapist or finally get approved or finally get the motivation, whatever it might be. And that whole first session is just questions. What brought you in? What are you struggling with? Tell me about your history. Have you ever had this? Have you ever had that? Or gathering information. An interview is just a face-to-face or even online, right? It's just a conversation with the purpose of gathering information. I imagine a lot of you have interviewed for jobs or maybe schools, right? It's just a conversation where I'm trying to see, what information I can gather from you. So in this case, it's a lot of questions about, your background, what's going on, what brought you in, your symptoms, how long have they been going on, and so on. Very common as part of this to slip in what's called a mental status exam. Oftentimes therapists, especially if they're meeting you for the first time, will ask you a couple of questions to make sure that you are oriented to like the present time. Do you know where you are? Do you know what the date is? right? Like if I asked you the date, maybe you don't know it exactly, right? But you're close, that would be fine. If you're like February 4th, I'd be concerned, right? Like it's way off. Like if you were like within a week, not so bad. Or like, oh, it's the end of August. Okay, that's fine. But if you have the wrong year, the wrong month by a lot, maybe you're not aware of what's going on. Do you know where you are right now? Right, little things like that. Who's the president of the United States? Right, so questions just to kind of see if you are aware of the world around you. And checking your like abnormal functioning, checking your mental functioning and awareness. And sometimes people who have things like schizophrenia aren't able to answer these questions accurately. The other really interesting thing about interviews is you can observe the person. So what are they wearing? How well is their hygiene? Do they look nervous? Do they look sad? Do they, what are the things that I can see in addition to the things that they're saying, right? So you can gather a ton of information from an interview, right? To get information about a client. There are some psychophysiological tests that we could use. We would only use these if we suspect that there's like a physical issue going on. Okay, so these are not always used as part of like a battery of assessments, but let's say we wonder if you have like an abnormal brain structure, or you had like some kind of brain trauma, or there's something going on physically that we want to rule out. We might consider doing something like a CAT scan or a PET scan or an MRI to see if there's any kind of damage to the brain or damage to whatever. I imagine a lot of you have had like a CAT scan or an MRI. They're relatively common. I've had them both for my sinuses. One's much shorter. CAT scans are quick, MRIs are much longer. But we can get a lot of information from these, and so it may or may not be used. Typically, they're only used here, again, if we think maybe there's something biological that we want to rule out or examine in the depth. And so this might be part of a battery or it might not, right? Like looking at kind of physiological responses or structural stuff and things in the brain. Another common thing that we use, in addition to interviews, are intelligence tests, commonly used in schools, right? School settings, school counselors use a lot of things like intelligence tests to measure somebody's intellectual ability. Now, when you take an intelligence test, you get an IQ score. IQ stands for intelligence quotient, right? It's a score that we like calculate and derive to give us an indication of your overall level of intelligence. Now, if any of you have ever taken statistics, you can see this like beautiful bell curve here. Anyone know what the average intelligence score is? What is the average roughly? Guesses? 100. Yep, you got it. 100. Okay, so on average, the most typical IQ is right around 100. Now we have what are called standard deviations. If you're anywhere within like 2 standard deviations, all of this in here. So all the way up to like 130 and typically like 70, 85 is kind of like a typical normal range of intelligence, especially if you're in the first one where it's like between 115 and 85. Like almost the entire population has an IQ within this range. But if you're over here or over here, that might be diagnostically relevant. And it might change the way we approach your schooling or the resources that you have or the things that you need access to in order to be successful. So we give people intelligence tests to get an idea of their IQ, and that might be diagnostically relevant. Maybe we're diagnosing them with something like autistic spectrum disorder or intellectual developmental disorder or something like that, right? Where we're trying to look at how their IQ might be shaping their behavior. The most common of all IQ tests is something called the Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale, or the WAIS. And it comes in a little briefcase like this, and you do a bunch of different scales, a bunch of different types of tests, because there's a lot of different types of intelligence, right? There's like numerical and vocabulary and sentence completion and picture stuff and spatial skills. There's one where you have to rearrange these blocks to match a picture. It tanks my intelligence score every time, right? I'm so bad at spatial stuff. But there's a bunch of different things. And so when you take this, they kind of average them all together to give you a final score. And you don't need to know this, but here's like all the different scales on it. So you would look at a bunch of images and say, what's missing? You would do those blocks, right? You do math, you do sequences, you do patterns, object assembly. There's a bunch of different types of things on here. And then when you're done, we average them all out to give you an IQ score. Okay, now there are problems with IQ. It's a very sometimes can be a little bit biased, but we use this a lot, especially in school settings. And I have an intelligence test for you, just for fun, to take today. It's got issues, right? So again, I want you to be thinking about why it's good or why it's bad. It's not as bad as the other test that you've taken. But I'm going to hand this out. Don't start yet. I'm going to hand this out to you. And then I will make sure to kind of give you a little heads up of how to do this. If you're looking at it going, I don't know the answer, I'm not intelligent, don't feel bad. So I'll explain and then you'll get it. Okay. So if you're looking at this, what I'm going to do in a minute here, I'm going to give you about like 8 or 9 minutes or so to do this. Don't look up the answers and try and work on it on your own. Obviously, if it's tricky, like I said, when we're here, do it silently. So what is number 1? What's the answer to number 1? Anyone understand it? Get it? Yeah.
24 hours in a day.
24 hours in a day. Okay, so what you're doing is figuring out what the letters stand for. So number 1 is hours in a day. Okay, so you're going to do that for each one of these. Again, don't look it up. Do your best. I'll give you about 9, a little less than 9 minutes. So if you don't know it, skip it, and then we'll go over it in a minute together. No, we can have use it because we will. Probably, I'm not sure if we'll get to it, but if we do, we have it. For, if I do it today, there'll be an extra credit with it. So just, maybe look at the end of the video that I post so that if you wanted to do the extra credit.
Got it. Cool. Thank you.
Okay. A little more than 5 more minutes or so. Three more minutes. Just about 1 more minute or so, and then we'll go over it together. Another minute. like 20 more seconds or so to start kind of wrapping up whatever we're on. All right, let's go over these together. If you're close, give yourself credit. If obviously if you get it right, give yourself credit as well. And just kind of keep track of how many you get. We already had number 1, but I'll just say it and then let's all say it together. If you know the answer, go ahead and say it together. So what's number 2? Letters of the alphabet. Nice. Okay, number 3. Days of the week. Number 4.
7 wonders of the world.
Wonders of the world. Let's go. All right, number 5. Signs of the zodiac. What? Right. I know. It's so obvious that people do that. Okay. Number 6. Books of the Bible. Number 7. Yeah, cards in the pack without jokers, right? Nice job. Number 8.
13 stripes in the US flag.
Yeah, stripes in the US flag. Some people looked at me like, right? Yes. Nailed it. All right, number 9. Yes, holes on a golf course. Number 10, my personal favorite.
31 flavors at Baskin Robbins.
Yes, flavors of Baskin Robbins. It's time. Number 11. Holes on a foot. Number 12. Degrees in a right angle. Okay. Number 13. 3 blind mice see how they run.
Okay.
All right. All right. Number 14. Science people. Temperature in degrees Fahrenheit at which water freezes. Number 15. Doing a 15. Digits in the zip code. 16. Wheels on a tricycle. 17.
100 cents in a dollar.
Cents in a dollar, like we got one back. Okay. Number 18. Players on a football or soccer team. Number 19.
There was more on the back.
Oh no, didn't say it. Number 19. Months in a year. Perfect. Number 20. Pounds in a ton. Nice job. 21. Tentacles on an octopus. Nice job. Number 22. Days in February in the leap year. 23. Innings in a baseball game. 24.
365 days in a year.
Days of the year. Anyone like, oh, wow, I know that one, right? Days of the year. Number 25. Loaves in a baker's dozen. Number 26. Weeks in a year. Nice. 27. Lives of a cat. Nice job. Number 28. 60 minutes in an hour. 29. Pairs of chromosomes in the human body. Number 30. Squares on a chessboard. 31. Planets in the solar system. 32. I've never had anyone get number 32. Just to put that out there. Balls to an over in cricket. No cricket players in here, right? So that's an interesting cultural one here. Number 33. Years in a millennium. And last one, 34. One day at a time. All right, so out of how many you got correct? And again, just for fun.
Could've gotten more if I didn't use it back.
Oh, no. All right. How many of you? You're still adding, sorry, I'm sure you have them. How many of you got at least 6 of them correct by show of hands? Look at all my somewhat intelligent people, right, according to this. All right, keep them up if it still applies. 7 or more? 8 or more? Well, if you 9 or more? 10 or more? 11, 12 or more. We've moved to intelligent now. 13. We lost a bunch. How many do you have? 13, 13, 13. Anyone get more than 13? Okay, so 13, we tap out at intelligence, right? I'll share with you, I got 8, right? I think the first time I took it. So don't feel bad if you didn't get a lot of it. It means nothing. This isn't the best test of intelligence. It's kind of fun, right? But why would this not be here? If I go back, why would this not be the best test of intelligence? Can you think of any reasons why? Yeah,
It's a bunch of sayings that some people might not have heard.
totally, right? It's one very specific little thing, bunch of sayings that maybe you have never heard before. Yeah,
They also don't never really, it might be often be applicable. Like if someone's an artist, they won't know the science stuff.
yeah, yeah. And they try to have a little bit of variety, which could be a strength. But then there's some that are random, like cricket isn't something that's common here. Maybe you don't go to Baskin Robbins all the time. I mean, you should, right? But you don't, and so you don't know the 31 flavors. What else? What else might make this not the best test of intelligence? Can you think of anything else? Yeah,
I'd say it'd be probably hard to standardize.
yeah,
Because everybody would have a different approach to this test.
okay. So I could give you all the same thing, right? But maybe the way that you take it might be different. Anyone here taken this before? Obviously, that would shape your results, right? Like, so if I gave this to you again right now, you probably all score very highly, right? Because you know the answers. I could give you one half and then give you the other half as a way to like do like a split half reliability. But this is one very tiny element of intelligence, right? So if I wanted a good, accurate indication of your intelligence, I should give you a lot of different types, right? So like when we were talking about this Wechsler intelligence scale, it has a lot of different types rather than one little thing. Maybe your brain just doesn't think this way, right? And so you would score low, but it has no indication of your intelligence whatsoever. So you can hold on to this if you want to, or get rid of it if it's making you mad. Either one is totally fine. I will give you a good test next time, right? A personality test. I'll give you a good one. Let me cover one more thing and then we'll stop after this slide. One more slide and then we'll be done. But intelligence tests are important. And there are a lot of really good ones. That one, not so much, but just for fun. One other way that we can do some assessment is to observe you. Naturalistic observation is exactly like it sounds. We're observing you in your natural environment. Okay, so it's almost like people watching with a purpose. Anyone in here like to people watch? I like to people watch. It's fascinating, right? Like several of you agree. I like to watch people on dates at restaurants and guess like how long they've been dating, if it's going well or not, right? Like, I mean, you don't want to be creepy about it, but I love to watch, right? And so it's interesting. Like when you're watching people, you can gather a lot of information, especially if they don't know you're watching them, or you are being very subtle about it, right? And so one thing that's commonly done in psychology is we watch kids play. And we record how many times they play with what, how many times they fight, how many times whatever happens, right? And so we're watching someone in their natural environment. Now, the downside is we have no control, right? I just have to like record whatever happens. And I don't know why you did what you did. I can just kind of observe. But the upside is people aren't being influenced. If you know you're being watched, you act differently, at least for a time. There might hit a point where you kind of forget and then you act a little more normal. And so we do have a variation on this called an analog observation. And that's what's happening in this picture over here. Sometimes we'll observe people through like a two-way mirror or two-way glass. And so they might know that they're being observed, but they can't see you. So they tend to forget that you're there and act kind of naturally. Our child development center. I don't know if any of you have taken a class down there or been down there. My daughter, my oldest, not fish and dip, but my oldest, went there for a year. And it was so cool because I could just go spy on her. It was like so amazing to me, right? I could go down there and sit behind the glass and she'd have no idea I was there. And then at the end of the day, I could be like, I saw that thing you did. And like just what she would come up with would be so hilarious to me. So sure. She'd be like, oh, this, and get all nervous. And I'm like, oh, not that one. Now I know about that too, right? But you're watching them and you can get a lot of information this way. Like, are they showing certain behaviors? Are they interacting with a lot of kids? What are the things that are going on? Yeah.
Preschool there in the 70s.
Nice.
And then, so when he got in there, I
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah, it's really cool. And it's one of the assignments. If you ever do take a child development class, they often have you observe the kids playing, right? As a type of research or as a type of like gathering information. You can learn a lot that way. The teachers do that as well. The other variant of this is you can observe yourself. It's kind of like journaling or keeping a diary or a log. Let's say you're struggling with addiction. Okay, you're addicted to cigarettes, right? Let's have you keep track for a week of when you smoke. What triggers it? Who are you smoking around? Is it a certain time of day? Right? Are there certain things that we can identify from that log? And that might help us to target things to change in therapy or target like certain things that we want to manipulate. Right? So you can observe other people, you can set up situations, or you can observe yourself. And this one is a really good one, right? Oftentimes people will journal or keep diaries or logs, and that can be really helpful as part of like a diagnosis or part of a therapy process. So again, as you can see, we're kind of building like different layers here. So this one is more watching you. And then we have one where we're interviewing you. We have one where we're maybe giving you a test of some sort. All of them together are going to give us a lot of information. So we still have a few more. Next time we'll start here. We'll get to personality inventories. And I'm going to give you one and a little extra credit opportunity with it as well. We don't have school on Monday. Okay, so it's happy and sad, right? I'll miss you, but it's at the same time, right? And when I see you on Wednesday next week, we're technically out of the time where we need to wear masks. If I hear anything else, I will let you know. But otherwise, have a wonderful weekend, and I will see you all next week on Wednesday.
Happy day.
You too, thank you. It's all Labor Day, right? Yeah. Oh, and if you want any more, just take some more Oreos on your way out.